Hi there, and welcome to today's video. And I'm sure you'll be excited to know that it's another one of those faith journey conversations. And I'm absolutely delighted that today we've got our very good friend Margaret with us. Not only is Margaret a good friend and her husband Dave, but they live fairly close. So I could almost, well, if I went out into the street and kicked a football, it would roll down to Margaret and Dave's house. So Margaret, thanks ever so much for having been willing to have this chat with me today. So in terms of your faith journey, where do you see the early beginnings? Does it go back to your childhood days?
It certainly does, yes. I can't ever remember not knowing about Jesus. So I think my mum, took me from the very beginning knowing about him.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember most about that is she used to sit on the step of my bedroom and we'd say prayers, and then she'd sing me the Lord's Prayer.
Wow.
And I remember that probably from being about 4 years old. So she'd probably done it as a lullaby even when I was a baby, but I can't ever remember not saying prayers and her singing the Lord's Prayer. So that was sort of an initiation, if you like. We didn't go to church as a family. My father wasn't a believer, and I remember going to Sunday school at 3-4 years old, and had a wonderful Sunday school teacher, which some people who live in Glenfield and New Parks may remember, Joyce Spence. And she was a wonderful lady, and she never married. I didn't know much about her family life, but she was from apparently quite a wealthy family, and she left a lot of I think almost everything to the church when she died, which says something about her dedication to faith. And one thing I remember about Sunday school is a picture which hung in front of us as we sat in a sort of semicircle, and Joyce sat virtually under this picture, and it was the famous picture of Jesus with the children all around him, all different coloured children, and I've treasured that memory throughout my life, really. And that's a good memory to sort of hold, especially at this time with all the problems with colour issues again, which anyway we'll come to that later.
So your mum's prayers and then this particular lady in Sunday school, really influential from what you were saying in your childhood years.
Certainly were, yes, certainly were. And I lost my sight when I was 8 years old, and that was a difficult time because nobody knew whether I was going to live or die, but anyway, I got over it, so I must have lived. But it meant that I missed 18 months of schooling, and then had to go away to a boarding school. Now that was really traumatic, but again, I think my childhood faith that I had did help to carry me through. And the head that I had at that school was a very good Christian man, and also the people who cared for us, I think they were called sisters, or I can't remember now what we called matrons, that was it, called the matrons. And each of them at the junior school were dedicated Christians and said prayers with us each night, and we had short services like most kids did in those days before class every morning, and we were taken to church every Sunday, so that kept my faith, childhood faith going.
Was it for you being actually away from home then, especially when you lost your sight?
Yes, I was away from home for term times really, and you were allowed to go home every third weekend, I think it was, or something, at junior school. So that was good, because Mum used to come and fetch me, and we'd travel on the train together from Birmingham, which is where it was, down to Leicester or across to Leicester, whichever it is, and I'd have a good weekend with my family and my friends.
Yeah.
And some of my friends at home kind of fell away after I lost my sight, so that was a bit sad, but it happened. But I made friends at school, so that was good.
Yeah.
Then I think the next step in my faith was really after I was probably about 13.
Yeah.
And I'd had a nervous breakdown, and was recovering from that, and I went to the head teacher, which was a really daring thing to do, to go and knock on her door, and asked if I could go to the Methodist church, and because we were all naturally taken to the Church of England, unless we were Roman Catholic. So I asked if there was a Methodist church. Well, there wasn't at that time a Methodist church in Chorley Wood, where I was at grammar school.
Yeah.
So she said, well, there's a free church on the Common, which you might be more comfortable with. Yeah. So myself and two other girls were allowed to go there to praise and worship, and absorb what we needed to absorb on a Sunday. Yeah. And that was really good. It was a tin hut, actually, left over from the war, apparently, and they'd adopted it after the war as a church, as a free church, and it was very inspiring. It was good, and the people were very friendly, and I got a lot out of that. And then later in my school years, I again went to the headmistress and asked, because by this time we were allowed to go a bit further, walk a bit further on our own, and travel on the buses. I'd be about 14, 15. And I asked if we could go to the local Methodist church, which was in the next village, Rickmansworth at the time. And she said yes. So there were about 5 of us by then that were Methodists, that went to the church in Rickmansworth. And as we grew older, some of us asked again the headmistress if we could go to the youth fellowship on a Sunday afternoon. And that was very encouraging as well, because we used to have discussions on topical things, in the news, and take a Christian approach to whatever was going on at the time. And it was very exciting times, because it was the early 60s, and you'd got all that went on politically, but also there was lots of new things happening because the economy had started to grow and lots of people had got jobs that hadn't had jobs for a long time following the war. And so there were lots of things to discuss. And we stayed on to the evening service as well. So I virtually spent all day at church, really, on Sundays.
So all that was nurturing your faith?
Yes, it was all nurturing my faith and getting to know other people and their attitude towards it. I met many lovely people at that church who, you know, carried me through school, really, because I hated school, but there you go. Mainly because it was away from home. It was a good education, but I didn't like boarding school, so yeah.
So what happens when you come to leave school then?
So when I left school, I strangely enough, I cried quite a lot when I left school because I suppose I felt insecure. You know, having been part of what I suppose now I'd call establishment for 7 years, it was hard going out into the big wide world, really. But I got a place at a college for the blind in London and trained as a telephonist typist. But just before I left my church in Rickmansworth, I had never taken communion. And one Sunday morning in May, I can't actually pinpoint the date, but I know it was May. I just felt the urge to stay on to take communion. And it was quite an experience. I did feel very different after I'd taken communion. And I think that was probably the first time the Holy Spirit tapped me on the shoulder, really. And I accepted the tap on the shoulder, you know what I mean? So that was encouraging because that was just before I left school. Then when I started work, I came back I trained in London and then came back to Leicester to find work. But I was about a year before I managed to get a job. There were loads of jobs around, but people were very reticent, shall I say, to employ me until I found a solicitor who was quite happy to do so, and I worked there for 7 years actually, before I moved on. And my church life in the meantime had changed churches because I'd met this guy called Dave Almy and he lived in Glenfield. So I no longer worshipped at Foss Methodist. I was well, I did. I still went to Sunday school there in the afternoons, but my main service was at Glenfield Methodist Church.
And did you find that you were accepted as a blind person by the congregation?
Well, yes. Mike Chester was our youth leader, and he was fantastic, really. I mean, I went on holidays with the youth, and we did pony trekking and things in Wales. It was really, you know, it was very accepting. And the youngsters along with me, I'm calling them youngsters, but they were the same age as me at the time, obviously. And yeah, they were very accepting as well. So it was really good. I even played darts, Steve.
Oh, right, did you?
There you go. Everybody had to stand out the way when I threw my darts, but you know.
Well done. That's amazing.
Yeah. So there you go.
So as you kind of entered adult years and begin the journey through adult years, how has your faith been nurtured and developing at that period?
Well, it was certainly nurtured and developed at Glenfield very well indeed, because we used to go to the evening service because there were no buses from Leicester to Glenfield before that I could catch to get to the morning service.
Yeah.
But also we had a youth fellowship after church at someone's house. The couple of names you won't recognise, but certainly the third one, Mike Chester, used to have a youth fellowship at his house, and which we went to. But it was a really good bonding time between the kids, and also with learning more about our faith and our journey along the way.
Right.
So that was really good.
Margaret, I'm going to suggest, sorry for interrupting you, that
no, that's fine.
It's been fantastic and great to hear your story, but I think you've got a lot more to say. So what I'm going to suggest, we take a little break there.
Yeah.
And then we start again. So it'll come over in 2 parts, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop at this point.